Welcome to the Therapeutic Food Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Marian Mitchell. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, therapeutic diet expert, and founder of The Road to Living Whole. There are many different diets out there. It's hard to know which one is right for you with your chronic illness and autoimmune disease. In this podcast, I'm going to share with you the foundational pieces every single therapeutic diet out there shares, and also how to use the best one for your particular diagnosis. If you've been looking for a meal planning partner, help navigating the complicated healthcare system, and want to feel better quickly, I'm your girl. Grab your kombucha and notebook. Let's dive in. Welcome to today's episode. Joining me again is Dr. Michael Biamonte, and I'm so excited because we are diving deeper into pharmaceuticals and the role they play in nutrient depletion and how that impacts our health. Dr. Biamonte, thank you so much for coming on again. For those who are maybe new to the podcast, can you give us an introduction on who you are and a little bit about your background?
Yes, I'm a clinical nutritionist. I'm also a naturopath, and I'm one of the people on the nutritional council board of the IAACN who writes the tests that the nutritionists take. So you have to be nice to me, otherwise I'm going to give you really hard questions, and you won't get your license. Yeah, so I really know what I'm doing, in other words, because if I'm writing the test that the nutritionist takes, then they've got to figure I have to know what I'm doing.
Yeah, awesome. So you are definitely well versed in the role that pharmaceuticals play in nutrient depletion. And I don't think people really understand that this is what happens. Like, they think that the medication just does whatever they say it's going to do, and don't realize that there's this whole physiological domino effect that happens. So I would like for you to maybe walk us
Just
through.
think about this. Think about this for a second. You put on television, and a commercial comes on for a drug, and after a while, it kind of sounds ridiculous. It sounds like Billy Joel, "We Didn't Start the Fire," going through all the symptoms and the side effects. It can cause diarrhea, constipation, your hair to fall out, and they go on and on. And then with antidepressants, they even mention the fact you can get suicidal thoughts and it can make your depression worse. So, I mean, really, you got to say, what is this here?
Right. And I think we're so used to those commercials, and they kind of squeeze it all in and mumble through it. And we don't really think about it. We just think about the promise that the medication offers. Plus, we kind of outsource our health and putting it into a medical professional's hands who does not know or does not study nutrition and just knows what the pharmaceutical companies are telling them, and not, they're really not studying the side effects of what happened. And we on this side of things know, and we're kind of on this battle of, do you really need this medication, and do you really understand what it's doing to your health?
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that. You know, um, Most people don't have a clue as to what's really going on. And what the scarier thing is, most doctors don't have a clue as to what's going on. Because as we were speaking earlier, doctor gives a person a medication, he goes on the medication, and then there's maybe a side effect to the medication. So the doctor then gives him another drug to try to handle the side effect of that medication. So now he's on two drugs combined. Now, most doctors don't know what the effects of those two drugs, because you're making a new compound inside the person's body. So now he's on the two drugs. Now the person complains about another symptom. Then he ends up on another drug to handle that symptom. And it's all stemming from the fact he was put on this first drug to begin with,
Right.
which is all based on symptoms. The whole approach is based on handling symptoms, because you don't have to talk to a doctor for too long to get the concept that they're treating your symptoms. The doctor is treating you based on the drug salesman who comes and visits him and says, for this illness with these symptoms, you're going to give this drug because this is the new thing we're selling. They don't think in terms of what the cause is. That's something that's absent in Orthodox medical teaching. What is the cause?
Right.
So they don't think, but that's much more of an Eastern viewpoint, is to try to find what the cause is and correct the cause. there's an old saying that in medicine, you don't want to cure the patient and you don't want to kill the patient, because if you do either one, you've lost a customer.
Yep. I love that you talked about the orthodox or the allopathic approach versus the Eastern medicine approach, and how one focuses on symptom management and one focuses on root cause medicine,
Mhm.
as we call it.
Yeah.
Symptoms are your body crying out for help, that there's an imbalance of some kind going on and it needs help.
Mhm.
Sometimes it is nutritional deficiencies, sometimes it's stored trauma, sometimes it's a truly physiological effect due from a lack of exercise, a lack of movement, a lack of sunshine. There's this whole plethora of things that can be a root cause. You and I focus a lot on, I mean, we obviously have a holistic approach, but we really love food and the nutrients that come from food and the role that that plays in health. So, what are some of the things that many medications tend to deplete and deplete very quickly? And also, can food replace those nutrients, or do we have to go above and beyond if we're going to be on a medication for a long period of time?
That's a very good question. So on the top of the hit parade, folic acid and B12 are depleted by many medications, and vitamin B1 and magnesium are also depleted by many medications. And when we look at when we just go on a broad spectrum across the country and we look at on people's tests, especially people who are being treated allopathically with medicine, what are the most common deficiencies they come up with? Well, wouldn't you know it? It's folic acid, B12, vitamin B1, B complex, and magnesium. The most common deficiencies. Now, somebody could argue that with magnesium and B1, it could be due to alcohol and sugar consumption, because alcohol and sugar are definitely widely used and they can deplete those nutrients. But it's also, when you look at the pharmacology, like if you open up when you get your medication, if you open up the box and you find that piece of paper with a really small type and you start looking in there, you're going to see that it will deplete all these nutrients.
Yeah.
And yeah, so those are the top ones, I would say.
And those are your energy producers and your relaxing mineral. So, your
Yeah.
B vitamins are what give you energy. Your magnesium helps us relax and sleep and keep calm. And so, a lot of times, and I know we both see this, that people who have been on, who've been chronically ill and are on these medications, they really do struggle with energy and sleep and muscle cramps and all of these
Mhm.
things.
You're being very kind right now. Because if we really want to push the limit, vitamin B1, the deficiency signs of B1 are beriberi, which is a neurological illness. And then if you go further with B1 deficiencies, you start to get hallucinations. You get B1 is also called the moral vitamin if you look it up in the old books, because what they noticed was that people who were low in B1 turned out to do very criminal and immoral things. So you want to push it. You can, as far as the person hallucinating or being nearly hallucinating, and then how do the people around him know what's going on? They know all they know is he's taking this medication. Now he's acting very strange. He's looking for things that aren't there, and then there's the old joke. Um, there's the old joke, like as you get older, you need a geriatric GPS. It not only tells you where you're going, but it tells you why you were going there and what you're supposed to do when you get there. So there is that aspect of it, but really so much of this is drug induced. And when you're looking at magnesium, magnesium is the body's natural channel blocker. We've heard of drugs that are channel blockers. What a channel blocking drug does is it sort of blocks calcium to try to make magnesium more dominant so as to relax your blood vessels so that your blood pressure comes down. But why don't rather than doing that, which is you're going around the bend to do this, why don't we analyze the person's magnesium levels and balance their magnesium with calcium rather than putting them up on a drug that's going to artificially try to block the calcium so that it balances better with magnesium? It's a little bit too much effort going in the wrong direction. It's not a good way to think.
It's working against our physiology instead of with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I always find this absolutely fascinating because the nutrient depletion, and I think about hallucinations, and in my family, I have a history of schizophrenia. It runs pretty strongly in my family history. Like, one of the things that we know is gluten is like, you remove gluten from a schizophrenic's diet and they have 100% remission, right? And it's like, okay, so is that, obviously the gluten is impacting the nervous system, but also is it because they're finally able to absorb nutrients and they're able to get that B1 and
Mm.
all of those things?
That's a very good point.
Again, it goes to that root cause medicine. Are there other depletions that are very common that can lead to these other symptoms? Because I think about hallucinations and all the medications and all the ways they try to manage that, which is like, again, it's this domino effect of all these medications deplete different things. Some of them deplete phosphorus and glutathione and all of these things, which impact our bone health and impact our immune system. And so I would love for us to, let's hit it hard. Let's let people know what they can really experience if they do neglect this aspect of side effects of medication.
The best book for your listeners to hunt down would be any book by Carl Pfeiffer. Carl Pfeiffer was the founder of the Brain Biocenter in Princeton, New Jersey, and he did tremendous research into the use of niacin in helping schizophrenics. And ultimately, what he found out is that schizophrenics who responded to niacin and responded to mega doses of vitamin C were copper toxic. Okay. Copper toxicity is a whole thing. We could do a whole show on copper toxicity and what the effects of it are, because when you have really high copper, it causes numerous effects physiologically, psychologically, and it's an environmental illness, essentially. Right. Most people who are copper toxic have acquired the copper from their environment. The easiest way to understand it is someone who lives in an old brownstone building. They have copper plumbing, which gets old and it starts to leach copper into the water. And then years of living there, eventually your tissue copper levels elevate. As the copper goes up, it causes a zinc deficiency. It causes vitamin C deficiency. It causes various other vitamins to drop, and then the person starts to get schizophrenic.
That's so crazy. And for those who do not know you and maybe haven't heard our previous episodes, we are both big fans of hair mineral analysis.
Yes, that's true.
So people might be thinking, oh my gosh, like, that's me. How would I know? That you want to make sure that the doctor who runs the test is literate and trained in it, because it's not something a doctor can just Google, and they don't learn it in school. It's something in addition to.
No. And the better labs will give the doctor a good interpretation so that they can also read to make sure they're not misinterpreting something. But he has to order the test with the interpretation. Otherwise, it just doesn't come with it. Right. The better labs are analytical research labs. Probably the best lab is Trace Elements Incorporated. And there's also Doctor's Data, which has been doing hair testing for many years.
That's the one I'm familiar with, is Dr. Data. Doctor's Data is the one that I had done. Yeah. I mean, it's just so crazy to think that something as simple as piping, could be the reason that maybe schizophrenia runs in a family, because everybody grows up in the same house.
Lived in the family. And then the other aspect of this too is barbiturates. Any drug which has a barbiturate effect or a tranquilizing effect that particularly inhibits the liver. These drugs cause copper toxicity, because how one develops copper toxicity is from not excreting enough bile. The reason bile has a component, which is copper, which is its natural component, and this is what causes the bile to have a greenish appearance. It's the copper in the bile. And if you do something, if you take a drug that inhibits your ability to release bile, the copper starts to build up in your liver, and then you also become, now imagine you got a person living in a building with old copper plumbing and he's on all these barbiturates or he's on these tranquilizers, his copper is going to go through the roof. And when you have high copper, you also get various symptoms of vitamin C deficiency, because copper oxidizes vitamin C. So a person with copper toxicity, he can probably tolerate 10 times more vitamin C before he might get any loose stool or any of the typical side effects of excess C, which really are loose stool for the most part. He'll be able to tolerate huge amounts.
So going down this path, like when I think of vitamin C deficiency, I think of scurvy. But
Yes.
what are some other symptoms of vitamin C deficiency that people can think about? Because I mean, through the pandemic and all that, vitamin C and zinc were pushed pretty hard. But I think that again, like we know we need it, we know we can get it from food, but how would we know if like we're experiencing this? What would be some symptoms for us to look out for?
The major one that people should recognize are bleeding gums.
Mm,
Because copper's involved in I'm sorry, vitamin C is involved with collagen formation and supporting collagen. So bleeding gums, starting to bruise easily, would be another to look for. But then as copper builds up, you oxidize more vitamin C. So then it becomes a question of is this person vitamin C deficiency or copper toxic? Constipation, believe it or not, is another. Most people don't know that vitamin C is the major constituent in your digestive fluids. When you take your digestive fluids and you analyze them, the most abundant nutrient in your digestive fluids is vitamin C.
I did not know that. And, I think about how many people struggle with that, especially, I work with a lot of chronic illness and a lot of Hashis, right? And a lot of thyroid disorders and things like that. Constipation is a major symptom of those. But I also have to wonder, is there something else deeper going on, right? And how simple it is.
There's two
Mhm.
aspects a practitioner needs to look at. You have to look at, first of all, and this is the first thing they should look at, is something blocking the process. So if you're looking at thyroid and this person has low body temperatures, let's say, well, the first thing, if he has low body temperatures, he has functionally low thyroid. So the next thing you'd want to do is you do a series of blood work. You look to see if his fasting insulin is elevated, because that's going to suppress his thyroid. You look at his leptin levels. You look at his reverse T3. You look at all these things to see if anything's malfunctioning. If you find things are malfunctioning, you want to say what could be blocking them that is more outside of his realm, coming in that's blocking it. Now, copper is a major one. Copper blocks the conversion of T4 to T3, and it also inhibits the sensitivity of your thyroid receptors to T3. So there's a problem. Mercury, very similar. Mercury has a very similar effect on thyroid to copper. So those are external things. But then you could also have some internal problems like cortisol. Excess cortisol blocks thyroid activity. And God knows how many chemicals there are in our environment which do the same thing with thyroid that interfere. Fluoride, for instance, we know that fluoride from toothpaste that immediately stores in your thyroid gland and blocks its function. So a doctor doesn't just want to look at, well, he's got a thyroid problem. What could he be deficient in that's causing his thyroid to lag? But what else does he encounter that's actually coming in and acting as some kind of a xenobiotic to block the thyroid function?
Yeah, it's such a different approach, even from I feel like that is like going deeper than like most that I've heard talk about root cause medicine. Like you're really going in and really taking this whole lifestyle analysis. Where do you live? What do you use on your body? What do you take into your body?
What kind of cigars do you smoke?
Oh, okay. Let's talk about that.
The average Cuban cigar is probably 10 times higher in lithium than cigars from Ecuador, Nicaragua, the Dominican Republic. Lithium is an incredible suppressant to thyroid activity. Incredible. So you get somebody who's smoking Cuban cigars for their whole lifetime, you're going to start checking their thyroid function, you're going to see it's really depleted. And no one would necessarily think of these
Right.
things, you see.
Right.
But as you were just saying about lifestyle, well, there you go. So what is the difference between a person smoking Cuban cigars and somebody who's smoking cigars from Nicaragua is going to be his thyroid function.
It's so interesting, how many different facets and just different things that impact the function, the way our bodies can function optimally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's why, like, going back to the basics of just clean water, clean food, taking in as few outside foreign chemicals and things, because I mean, even smoking cigars, the heat, the burning, the smoke, there's all these different layers, right? And it's like, I feel it can be a little bit overwhelming for people. So one of the things that we work on in the integrative medicine approach is how can we support the body in the best that we can, right?
Hmm.
And so if people are, let's say that they're in the middle of an autoimmune flare, right? And or that I can think of some people who had really bad, like lupus that attacked their internal organs, and they've been on these medications. They're trying to get off of them, right? But they're on them for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So they're on these medications. If they get off of them, they start ballooning and having edema, and their kidney function declines and all this stuff, right? So they feel stuck. What are some things that people can do to help support their functions through this process to hopefully get to a point where their body is able to balance itself out?
Well, they want to get a series of tests done
Okay.
so that they know and you can isolate exactly what's going on. Because if you don't have the tests, you're going to have surprises. And the surprises end up being a big question mark. What is this? What's happening?
Right.
So you take a person comes in, they've got this, let's say this autoimmune profile. You put them on different nutrients. Now, you're trying to support or balance them. You don't know, as an example, that they're mercury or toxic, or mercury toxic, copper toxic, something like this. You don't know this. It just happens to be a coincidence that the nutrients you give them start binding toxic metals and allowing them to start excreting the metals. There are all types of various symptoms that happen when a person excretes metals, especially if he's not doing it that efficiently. Mm-hmm. One of the major things, he can start getting migraines and headaches. He can get a metallic taste in his mouth or metal taste on his skin or a metal taste or smell in his poop. He can start breaking out in rashes. So this person goes on this program, and now he has these now he's saying these are side effects. Well, if you want to call it a side effect, you can call it a side effect. But the person inadvertently is starting to detox metals he didn't know he had. Now, had the person gotten testing and knew those metals were there, it would be a different story.
Right.
Because you would know possibly you may start detoxing these metals, or better yet, those metals are maybe one of the first things we need to go after to get them out of your system to correct, because they're causing the autoimmune problem. Mm-hmm. So getting a series of tests, getting yourself tested for things like Candida.
Yeah.
Another thing most people wouldn't know if they had or not, but yet Candida can interact with all these nutrients. You put a person on B complex and vitamin D and coenzyme Q10, all these things that sound good, those nutrients flare Candida up like crazy. So the person starts taking these nutrients, and now he's getting rectal itching. He's starting to have all this gas and bloating. He's getting brain fog. He's getting a flare up of Candida from the nutrients, but he doesn't know that. You see, so the smartest thing a person could do would be to get a battery of tests, pretty wide range areas. This way, the doctor can look at them. He can see what's wrong. He can explain to the patient, well, these are the things you have wrong. They can relate to each other and overlap in terms of some of your symptoms. And this may be the best way for us to approach handling it. We want to handle this in a sequential fashion, where we're going to go after this problem first and then that problem. And you want to do it sequential because you don't want to do something that's going to trip the other problem.
Right. It's so funny because, I work with a wide range of practitioners all over the country, and I see the ones who work sequentially, and then I see the ones who feel like they kind of just want to punch everything in the face, is what I call it, right? They just like hit really, really hard and want to do everything all at once. And what is interesting is I work with the patients, right? Mm-hmm. And what I see is they just want to feel better. So they tend to like the doctors that just want to throw everything at them because they just want to feel better. But in that process, they feel worse. And then they really have a hard time sticking with it, versus the ones who work sequentially. But they also feel like it's going to take me so long to get better. And how I like to approach it is like, well, you have to think about untangling like a bunch, like let's say you open your jewelry box and a bunch of necklaces fly out and they're all tangled,
Oh,
right?
that's a good analogy. Yeah.
You have to slowly peel them apart, and sometimes things retangle and then all of a sudden it falls apart, right? It's not like peeling back the
Right.
layers of an onion or anything like that. It's not that clean. And so it's like when we work sequentially, it's kind of like a snowball effect. It seems a little bit slow at first, but as you work through it, because you're working through one problem at a time, you start removing things that are inhibiting the healing process.
Hmm.
You're removing the things that have been blocking the body from functioning optimally. So then healing starts happening much more quickly. I think a lot of people think that, we're so used to take a course of antibiotics for 10 days and start feeling better within 24 hours that anything that takes 6 months, 9 months, a year, 18 months feels like a really long time. But in the process, like really in the scheme of things, you've been sick for years. Like if you've
Yes.
been sick, for 10, 15, 20, I've known people who've been sick for 30, 40 years, and I'm like, you're not going to feel bad the entire time, but it's going to take like you've been sick your body has a lot of healing to do. It's not an overnight microwave process.
Hmm.
Do you find that that's true in your practice as a doctor and a nutritionist?
Well, basically, the person doesn't have a choice because it's not going to work. You see,
It's true.
they have the choice of being on drugs the rest of their lives, feeling like a wooden barrel and having all their symptoms just covered up, or they have the choice of going to the doctor who's trying to punch everything at once. And that's where I get a lot of my patients from, are those doctors, because those patients can't stay on those programs. They have too many crazy reactions. There's too many questions, and
Mm.
it's not working. So they eventually end up finding a doctor who you could say specializes in handling things sequentially. That's what I'm known for, is handling things sequentially, but also understanding what the right sequence is. And that's a key. But they don't have a choice. I would say ultimately, to really, it sounds funny, but they don't have a choice because it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like taking the long way around.
Yeah.
Because like you feel like it's going to happen faster because you're tackling everything at once, but actually it draws out the process because it's unsustainable and it's
Yes.
uncomfortable.
Yes. It's also very expensive.
Yeah. And it's funny because I know people are moving out of the allopathic model and they're wanting to tiptoe into integrative medicine. And it's not insurance based and it's cash pay, right? You don't want to be throwing spaghetti at a wall. You want to test and not guess, especially if you're dealing with something chronic and long term and really uncomfortable and just you're not getting answers. But the thought of spending anywhere from, oh gosh, I don't know, 500 to 1500 on tests and things like that is really intimidating. But if you think about all the specialists you've gone to, all the tests that you've done, the $400 $500 a month in medications that you're taking, it pays for itself within a year.
Mhm.
Right. But just that initial, like, it feels, a lot of people describe it as just kind of like this overwhelming, almost like a sucker punch. Like it feels unattainable to spend that money. But I'm like, think about all the money you've spent over the last year on your specialists and your medications and all your insurance premiums that are high because you have these symptoms going on. It's way more than it would be to take those tests.
It doesn't impact a lot of people because their insurance pays for a lot of the tests and the medications. So it doesn't hit them quite the same way. So then they're not really looking at it as energy, because it's all energy, really, if you want to look at it
Mm-hmm.
that way. You going and doing tests, you going and taking medication, it's all your energy that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
So maybe if they think about it as energy and your attention units being on all these things, that might be a little bit different than financial, depending on their insurance. But the bottom line is it doesn't work. Like I have to keep going back to that. It's not going to work.
Right.
It's illegal in certain states. It's illegal to say you can cure a disease, certain diseases. You
Right.
can't say you can cure them because the medical profession hasn't come up with a quote unquote cure. So any doctor who says that he can cure your disease in certain states is he's subject to be put in jail.
Right.
So going back to as you're saying, the medical model, they're not expecting to cure something. What
Right.
they're looking for, and it goes back to the bad joke I made earlier, they're going back to the fact that you don't want to kill the patient. You don't want to cure the patient. You want to keep him as a customer of the medication he's on to control his symptoms. It's about symptom control.
Right. And, us in the integrative world, we always talk about how we work ourselves out of a job. Unfortunately, there's so many sick people that's not true. But what we do is patients make this upfront investment with us and with the testing, and their cost for care goes down.
Yes.
And they reach a point where they feel great and it's just maintenance.
Yes.
Right. They might need, they might get sick and want like an IV, or they might have a little bit of a flare up and need a little extra support for a short time, but they learn to recognize the symptoms. They know what to do. Versus the other model where it starts out with small copays and very little, but as you go on and get sicker, actually your cost increases over time.
Yes.
I know people that are even with insurance spending $300-$400 a month on medication, and they're spending hundreds of dollars a year on their annual MRI or CAT scan or, whatever. And then their insurance premium is more. And so I see kind of that side of it. And it's like, which path do you want to go? Do you want to go to the path that gets more expensive and takes more energy and sucks the life out of you? Or do you want to take the time and investment into actually getting and feeling healthy so that you can live the life that you want to live?
They have to keep in mind medications don't cure their problem. There's no medication that does that. What medications alter pathways in the body to try to cover up a symptom that's taking place. The medication doesn't cure anything because the medication isn't natural to the body. It's not innate to the body. There's no such thing as someone with a Prozac deficiency.
Right.
It doesn't exist. Now, someone could have a deficiency of 5-HTP, which then could cause their neurotransmitters to drop. Well, that could be, but it's not a deficiency of the drug because the drug is not part of the body's biochemistry.
And the drug isn't providing 5-HTP.
No, interestingly enough.
It's not providing what is missing or not being produced or not being absorbed or doesn't have the enzymes to convert or whatever it is that the body needs. It's not doing that. It's just it's altering pathways.
Well, if people really understood how SSRIs work, they'd probably freak out. But it would explain why you have these commercials for the SSRIs which say it can make your depression worse, you can get suicidal thoughts, because SSRIs don't really raise your serotonin. What they do is they're called serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So what they're actually doing is they're blocking the reuptake of serotonin through the blood-brain barrier, so that you're creating a deficiency in a sense of serotonin in your brain so that your serotonin receptor sites become much more acute. Now, to me, I would rather just go get my serotonin tested. Oh, well, then I'll take 5-HTP and raise my serotonin. Again, as you coined earlier, it's like going around this circle or this back door way of doing something. And it's great, but that's how they work.
Yeah. So our point is that medications don't work. You have to get to the root cause. And to get to the root cause, you have to test.
Yes.
And you need to go to a doctor who's willing to work sequentially with you. And everybody has a different approach to that. Most naturopathic doctors who've been trained at a naturopathic medical school will have a very similar approach versus somebody who's not a trained naturopathic medical doctor. If somebody is hearing this for the first time and they want to start down this path, where do you recommend that they begin?
Well, they probably want to find a functional medical doctor in their area or a certified clinical nutritionist. They can go online and visit the website of the IAACN to find a certified clinical nutritionist. They can do Google searches for functional medical doctors in their area.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to, but that's good. But then you also want to ask around and try to get a referral from people and see, because there are some doctors you can encounter just having like incredible bedside manners that would you'll leave your car in the parking lot and run. Then there are other guys who are pretty good. They can communicate and they can listen. Listening is very important for the doctor, to listen and just not assume that he's just going to put this person on a program he gives everybody. So I would think you'd want to do that. You want to look at their ratings and whatnot. But you also have to remember, when you look at ratings for health practitioners online, that probably for every one person that writes a good review, there's 20 that never wrote a review because they're they're either lazy or they're done with it. They're feeling perfect now, so that's fine. He did a great job. I'm off mountain climbing or something. So you have to keep that in mind too. And then also
Right.
some of the reviews people write on practitioners, if you knew what the real story was, how they owed that doctor $20,000, never paid him, or they were taking the money they were going to use to pay the doctor. Instead, they went to Hawaii on a vacation. That's an actual true story of chiropractor here I know. He was giving this family this incredible discount because they went there crying. They really needed his help, and they all had these problems. He gave them this incredible discount, and then one day they said, "Well, we're not going to be here for the next month." And the receptionist said, "Why? We know what's happening. Oh, we're going on vacation for Hawaii for a month." So, but anyway, yes, that's what they should do. They should, go on the internet, find a practitioner, try to get some idea from people who've seen him, how he is. That would be the first step.
Awesome. And then I would like to add just being open to change. And that change feels difficult because it takes more energy in the beginning, but the changing of your diet and the changing of your lifestyle and changing toothpaste and lotion and things like that. You don't have to do it all at once, but these incremental changes have such a huge impact. And change is it's not difficult, or it's not hard, but it's not difficult, but it's hard, right? Because it requires changing your habits. It requires changing the way you've been doing things, but it's only hard for maybe about 3 weeks, and then it starts getting easier. So that's just my little health coach tip, is like, as you're getting counsel and guidance from an integrative practitioner, that change requires a little bit of mental energy. It doesn't require more time, but it just requires more mental energy just because we're changing our habits. But it's only hard for about 3 weeks, and then it starts getting easier.
But the person has to remember too that if you don't change something, you're not going to correct something. And
Mhm.
whatever they have been doing all this time has led them to where they are. So obviously, continuing on the path that they're on is not the route out, because it was the route to where they are now. So if there's not going to be a change, there's not going to be a correction of what's been going on.
Yeah, you have to go into it ready to do what it takes to not only get healthy, but to understand that to stay healthy, you can't go back to what you were doing before. This isn't a temporary diet that's going to, like, you're going to lose 15 pounds and then you can magically eat whatever you want again. That never works to begin with.
The people I feel bad for, though, are the people who have mold in their house,
Oh,
who have a toxic building or sick building syndrome. Because now in those people, when you start talking about change for them, you may be talking about changing your house, your living status. You may be talking about gutting the house,
mhm.
which puts them in a hotel or motel or something. Probably throwing away most of your clothes unless you do a good job of getting the mold out. So there's a situation that I don't envy. That's a rough one.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because mold toxicity it's a bear. It's a rough one. And a lot of times when it's due to, especially your home and your furniture and your books and your clothes, and you just don't, the what it takes to get healthy is quite an uphill battle. And it's just, what I do find though is those who are struggling with that, they're willing to do whatever it takes.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like almost mold feels like doable because it's something that you can find, you can test for, you
Yes.
you can control. Like, yes, it's like a restart or a refresh. Like, you kind of have to throw out the old and start with the new. And sometimes that can be exciting for
Mm.
people, especially if they've been really sick. But I feel like there's always that first mental freak out that
Yes.
happens. But I think mold is one of those that is really okay, that's doable. And then I was thinking about like copper pipes, right? Like, yes, that's a big pill to swallow, but that's doable too once you
Hmm.
know what it is, right? Or like mercury, you can get your fillings removed and replaced. You can change out your toothpaste with from fluoride to nanohydroxapate, right? But it's like getting to the point where you need to know what you don't know so that you can fix it.
Yes, that's a good way to look at it.
And it's once you get through the initial freak out and kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, it's empowering,
Hmm.
right? And the functional medicine approach or the integrated medicine approach is we really do want you empowered to own your health and to find out what you need to know that you don't know so that you can move forward. Because we
Very
want you
true.
feeling good.
There's a very good source for mold, Michael Rubino. You can find
Mm-hmm.
him on Instagram. He wrote a book called The Mold Medic.
It's a
I,
good book.
I happen to know he's worked with a lot of Hollywood celebrities and with their mold issues, so he gets good results.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with before we wrap up?
And investigate your medications and look to see what the side effects are. It's one of the first things that I do with my patients when they start telling me they have a side effect or something. I find out if they've gone on a new medication, and then we look up the side effects. 50% of the time, the symptoms they're having are from a new medication.
So crazy. And then the one thing I do want to let people know is you can find out just on a quick Google search. You can put in the name of your medication and what nutrients does it deplete and get a full list,
Hmm.
right? And and I feel like knowledge is power. I do feel like if you're really struggling with a lot of symptoms, trying to figure it out yourself takes a really long time. It is worth investing in somebody who can guide you and guide you strategically and correctly versus trying to figure it all out yourself because that takes a really long time. And
Yeah,
sometimes you never fully get the full picture.
true.
So I know like when I was first on this journey, I didn't really know what I didn't know, but I just knew that I was researching and learning and making changes on stuff that I learned. And it took like 7 years. And it's like it shouldn't take that long. We can do some testing and really get to a root. And in just a few months, you take those 7 to 10 years of learning and shorten it down to, a year and a
Hmm.
half. And then you are like hitting the ground running and living your life to the max, to the fullest. So,
One of the things we should mention before we end off, because it's one of the more common problems, are statin drugs.
okay.
Statin drugs, unfortunately, cause a deficiency of coenzyme Q10.
Yep.
And when you have a deficiency of coenzyme Q10, you could have a heart attack, or you have severe muscle problems like muscle lethargy, muscle cramps, muscle pain, lack of oxygen going to your muscles. And if it happens to occur in your heart, you can have a heart attack from low CoQ10. And of course, the comedic thing is most of these people who are taking statin drugs are doing it because they're trying to avoid having a heart attack.
The pill causes the problem.
No.
And in our American diet, where we don't really eat organ meat or things like that, getting CoQ10 is actually quite difficult. So we're normally pretty deficient in it to begin with.
Yes.
The other thing that statins do is they raise insulin levels. So then you're becoming type 2 diabetic, even if you're eating well and exercising. So there's just this whole plethora of side effects,
You're
and
back to the heart
you're
attack.
back to the heart attack again.
Right.
So there's much more efficient ways to manage your cholesterol beyond statins in a way that doesn't cause more problems.
Right. So the person can find out their blood type. If they follow the book, eat right for their blood type, they'll be amazed at things that will improve without them having to take drugs. And then there's always the golden rule: eat organic, non-GMO.
Yep.
Avoid GMO foods. Try to eat mostly organic. And do things like find your blood type, following the diet, things people can do on their own. Investigate, as you were saying before, the deficiencies your drugs are causing. There's a lot they can do on their own, and it can make major inroads.
Yeah. I always love when the simple, I could quote air quote, simple cases come to me where it's really just really simple tweaks and their health just skyrockets. That's my
Right.
favorite,
Yes.
before there's like super chronic and super sick. no matter what, small changes will have a huge impact on your quality of life. Might not resolve everything, but the more that you can do and empower yourself, for one, you'll know what questions to ask to find a practitioner that you jive with, that you feel like can really help you, when that trust is essential. But then also you're in control of your health at that point, and you're able to even take what your doctor tells you, and if you have questions, you can research it yourself and make sure that you feel comfortable with those recommendations. And if you don't, you can go back and have a dialogue, right? And I feel like that's just
true.
so important in the doctor-patient model, is that especially integrative medicine, they want you to be part of the process. We want you to be part of the process. We don't want to be doing it all for you. We can't do it all for you.
No. It goes back to responsibility. The person has to exercise responsibility for their condition.
Yeah, there's no more outsourcing.
No.
No.
Not in the real world.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining
You're
me
welcome.
today. I just love having you back, and I'm so glad we dove deeper into this topic, and I can't wait to have you back again.
Absolutely. I'm ready whenever you are.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you found this episode helpful, would you do me a favor and help others find it by leaving a review, sharing a screenshot on social media, or sharing the link with a friend? By you sharing what you've learned, others are able to find this podcast and join our community. Be sure to check out my website, www.roadtolivinghole.com, for over 160 delicious recipes, a variety of meal plans, and a blog packed full of even more healthy living tips. If you'd like to learn more about how to work with me as your coach, you can schedule a free consult through www.roadtolivinghole.com/health-coaching/. Until next time, friend. Bye.